Hey, it's Janelle Molony, and today I'm exploring the Fort Caspar Museum. I'm excited to tell you some stories that will go beyond the gallery exhibitions into little known facts about things happening here at the Platte Bridge Station in 1864, as it was called back then. And so I hope you'll enjoy those extra little moments of history. Thank you for joining me. Let's go explore. Let's go inside the Caspar Museum and check out what they've got inside. I know we're supposed to exit through the gift shop, but it's right here at the front, and it's really cute, full of tons of things. If you're a tourist, there's a lot to consider for your take-home gift. Oh, look at this one. I want to point out this book here, The Forgotten Senator, and it talks about Preston Plum. It was written by my friend Joanna Wickman, and she did an incredible job creating a biography that goes beyond politics. It goes beyond the surface level idea of who this man was, and it's worth taking a look. Of course, we've got it here at the museum, so while you're here, get it and see what he's done in his life that goes beyond. I wanted to point out a section I found down here in the women's books. Right here, that's Sarah Jane Rousseau's 1864 Trail Diary, and there are mentions of coming this way. In fact, you know what? I've got a copy. Let me just pull that up while I'm over here, and we'll see what my third grade grandmother, Sarah Jane Rousseau, has to say about visiting Fort Caspar, or the Platte Bridge Station as it was in 1864. I'm looking in Sarah Rousseau's diary from her entry of July 21st, a Thursday, in case you were wondering. She says that they started from camp this morning without eating breakfast, there being not enough for the stock to feed on. Went on to the Upper Platte Ferry and Ford, and there we met a gentleman that traveled in a train that left us below Laramie. His name is Northrop. We did not meet him again until this morning. And this is where whoever this guy Northrop is, who I have not been able to identify, he actually recounts how Arthur Wright, who Sarah calls Buckskin, was one of the casualties of the Platte River Raids. So she learns about their fate from Mr. Northrop, and that's kind of sad. She relates that it's awful to think of the depredations and the mischief that the Indians have done this season. For sure. They also hear at this time that there was one small train completely destroyed, the people all massacred and wagons burned. They found the body of a little girl, and that is a direct mention of the Fanny Kelly and Sarah Larimer wagon train that was attacked on July 12th, the same day that the Rousseaus were attacked. So the Kelly-Larimer incident occurred on Little Box Elder Creek in Douglas, and I've talked about that and visited that site in other videos, so I hope you check that out. Well, after being entirely distracted by the beautiful collection of fun things to look at in the gift shop, I think, let's go check out the actual museum now. All right, we've got a lot to choose from. Which way do we go first? This way. I really appreciate the artwork in this Emigrant Wagon Train Cove that they have here at the Fort Caspar Museum. And I want to zoom in, and I'm going to show you, the camera will zoom in on the women's outfits, the prairie outfits. And I want you to look at their skirts. You can see them up in the painting overhead, which is by Ray Blaha, and also in the mural that's painted in the inner cove. The women's skirts are straight down. There is no crinoline or hoop skirt underneath those dresses. And when I crafted a costume that matches my third great grandmother's outfit from 1869, but perhaps even sooner, I wear that to certain events and I recreate, have fun with that. Some people ask me, well, where's my hoop skirt And part of the lesson that they're learning is that once the women get out on the trail, they ditch their underwear as fast as possible. They're not going to be walking on the trail with their hoop skirts and even a corset. No, those things get tossed right away. We need to be able to move. We need to be able to breathe. We need to get up on a horse if we need to, or run from something if we need to. And we can't be hung up by all these contraptions underneath. So even though it's not officially documented anywhere that the women were tossing their unders, yeah, it happened. So one question that comes up in my mind when I am reading old travel accounts, immigrant travel diaries or letters written back home, is when they mention that they were attacked by Indians, they try to label who it was. And I always wondered, like, how do you know what tribal band attacked? Or how do you know what tribal band you're, dealing with at this point? But I did learn in my research on the Platte River Raids that after being attacked, the immigrants would collect artifacts, I guess. They would collect the arrows that were on the ground, and they would bring that back to the fort. In this case, after the Platte River Raids, they would be bringing this evidence to Deer Creek Station garrison, or even here to the Platte Bridge Station. And they would use that to show these are the people that attacked us. And who knows if even the soldiers who looked at it really knew the differences in various craft work that was put in by different tribes, or maybe they looked all the same, or I don't know. But they did bring that. So at some point, someone who understood what they were looking at was able to say, oh, this material belongs to the Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Northern Arapaho. So they were able to narrow that down. Although some of the accusations that are found in immigrant accounts are very specific towards other Northern Plains tribes, and I don't know where they get that information from. I don't know. You just have to wonder. So I'm standing next to a mountain howitzer, and it's not that big, but it definitely looks big and heavy enough that I would not want to try and move it by hand, with a rope or chain over my shoulder hauling it. I would definitely want a horse or two to help me haul this across the plains or through the Laramie Mountains if I was required to use it and I was a member of the 11th Ohio, which is exactly what happened on July 14th of 1864, because on that day, a regiment of their soldiers from Fort Laramie were headed north towards Deer Creek Garrison in Glen Rock in response to the Platte River Raids that happened on the 12th, 13th, and 14th. Well, as they are headed north, the Plains Indians who are attacking in that series of events decides to take the cavalry unit and demote them to an infantry by taking all of their horses. So in that instant, instead of having horses to haul the howitzer, and they had two of them with them, the soldiers would have had to figure out how to move it on their own. So I don't know, what do you think? Did we have two guys pushing from the back and a few hauling from the front? You got to imagine these things. How'd they do it? It doesn't say what it weighs, but it doesn't look nice and easy to carry, that's for sure. Oh. Let's go check out the grounds. This is definitely the place to be hanging out on a cold winter's day. We're looking at a bunkhouse. These are pretty big beds. I wonder if it was two to a mattress. I don't know. Honestly, this is, in my opinion, way more cozy cute than the bunkhouse at Fort Laramie. Sorry, not sorry. This is way cuter. But then again, I grew up camping and going to log cabins and such in the woods, and this kind of reminds me of that vibe. And I wonder which one of these basically cubby holes. They're kind of just the same size as a horse stable, but which one of them housed Caspar Collins? And as you saw when I was looking around there, there's a table in there where you can write notes or letters to your loved ones. And he wrote a lot of letters from here, and he was writing to friends and family, but he wrote to his mom about what he's doing to stay busy and, you know, stuff that kids write to their mom, those obligatory, send me a letter and tell me how things are going. In his letters, which you can get online, there's a collection of letters. I think it's The Life and Letters of Caspar Collins, something like that. But there is a letter that he writes about the entertainment at his disposal over at Fort Laramie, which includes traveling minstrel shows and performances that are done in blackface. And I think that's a topic that I didn't dive too deeply into, but it should be explored more, of those types of productions that were happening over at the fort to entertain the soldiers, but also to entertain the immigrants coming through. And it's something worth saying, Apparently they would prefer to have, as they called them, Ethiopian songsters or actual African Americans to entertain them with very, very racist types of, you know, mammy and kind of caricature performances. But if they couldn't get someone to do that, sometimes the soldiers would put some grease on their face and give it their best shot. It makes me uncomfortable talking about that. Good Lord, it can get hot out here. It was so cold this morning. So those tents that I just passed that are square shaped, pay attention when you're reading Emigrant Tales of the Platte River Raids on the north side trails section. On July 14, there is an attack that occurs that I speculate is part of a organized crime ring, and perhaps it's even an entirely separate event from the original series of coordinated attacks. And some of the evidence for that comes from observations of who's leading the Indians who attack on the 14th over in Douglas. And some of the information comes from archaeological findings in the area that show that one of those tents, a square tent, was installed in a location where other traditional round teepee tents were erected. So then we have to wonder, well, did they trade for a square tent? It would have been smaller. It's not the same as having their teepee, and they can't have their, you know, sometimes they have a little fire inside to stay warm. So it just doesn't function the same. So there's one theory. Did a Plains Indian decide to trade for or buy one of those military tents, or was someone in the military somehow involved with that attack? I don't know. Right now I am standing on a recreation of the old Platte Bridge that would have connected folks from the north side of the Platte River to the south side of the Platte River. I'm looking north, and behind me, if you look really closely and squint and see through trees, you'll see red buttes. And so after turning off the north trail, they'd cross the bridge, or they could opt to pay for a ferry. There's other ferries around here trying to capitalize and compete on business. You would head that way south past the Red Buttes, and you'd be following the Sweetwater River from there down to Bessemer Bend and Devil's Gate, and then South Pass. Something that I have also discovered in my research of the Platte River Raids was another attack here at the Platte Bridge Station in 1864 that has been previously unrecognized as a Civil War era battle, and that happens on July 25th, 1864, almost 1 year exactly before Caspar Collins was involved in another battle of Platte Bridge Station and ended up not surviving. But I wanted to read a little bit about this 1864 attack. It seems that the events are a response from Plains Indians who have been interrogated in maybe even a violent way by Union soldiers who were on various expeditions after the Platte River Raids. Particularly, they were looking for anyone who might know of information on the whereabouts of Fanny Kelly, who was kidnapped. And so when these expeditions went out, some of the soldiers were feeling very trigger happy. So the way that they approached a local tribal band to ask questions or interrogate them sometimes ended up resulting in instigating more violence. But anyways, so the battle here is written about in the Pella Company records, where my third great grandmother, Sarah Rousseau, writes that she's hearing about the reports at a telegraph station near Devil's Gate. Again, that way. And she says that the soldiers and the Sioux Indians had a fight. The soldiers captured 200 heads of horses. And Sarah is convinced that her horses might be part of that, although I think they've given them up for loss at this point. Corporal Hervey Johnson, who is a member of Company G, wrote about this incident in a letter, and he said that the Indians tried to run off even more horses near the garrison, and the soldiers responded by peppering them. So in 1864, stationed here at the Platte Bridge Station were members of the 11th Ohio Volunteer Cavalry. And at one point in the summer of '64, the command of the station was left to Sergeant Merwin. And after the Platte River Raids, he saw that a Blackfoot Sioux chief, Bill Grass, was coming his way from Utah, from the south. And that Chief Bill and his men were hoping to stop by the fort and get some food and to proceed through the Black Hills of Idaho, as it was back then, Idaho Territory, in safety. And Sergeant Merwin reported, or someone reported, that the Indians were over at Red Buttes, and everyone was sort of really alarmed, and they even considered maybe Chief Bill was responsible for the attacks on immigrants from July 12 to 14 of 1864. And so Sergeant Merwin's commander, who was at Deer Creek Garrison at that point in Glen Rock, he issued a command, and he said, "You go, and I want you to take all of Chief Bill's men, and I want you to interrogate them and see what their involvement in the Platte River Raids was. And Sergeant Merwin disobeyed the order. I think Sergeant Merwin knew. It wasn't Chief Bill. He knew. So the next day, the commander shows up here at the fort and personally repeats his order. And so Sergeant Merwin has to go out with a group of men to confront Chief Bill. And he kind of gives it away that it's a trap. It's set up. And so for that, I kind of really like him. Even though he was more or less forced to follow his orders, he still knew that Chief Bill wasn't responsible. He still knew that that was wrong to pursue him. And he did his part in giving Chief Bill and his men a heads up to run. He goes on to say that in retaliation, our boys destroyed all the lodges and everything the Indians had. You may think that they are receiving rough treatment from us, but it is nothing compared with what is their due. These are tough stories to tell. And they make me uncomfortable sometimes. And I'm happy to admit that. And I think that's an important thing for historians to admit, that sometimes when we dig up these stories, they reveal something about our own people, our own culture, and we don't like it. It doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good. But the story must be told. Y'all, I've been here for 2.5 hours already. This campus is huge. Use some water, bring some water. And if it's August or any time when the sun shines here, bring your sunblock. Plan accordingly, because it's worth it to be out here. And even if I do get a little sunburn today. You remember at the beginning of the tour, I mentioned my friend Joanna Wickman, who wrote the Preston Plum book. And this year she did something that I really appreciate. Joanna works with the Fort Caspar Museum Association, and she helped to raise the funds and figure out the logistics to increase the amount of headstones out here. Originally, there were only 11 headstones, which is kind of, I guess, cute, 11 for the 11th Ohio. But Joanna also does a great job of making sure that we remember that the fort was not all about the 11th Ohio. Kansas was also here too. And so she makes sure that we know that, and that those soldiers who were stationed here after the Platte River Raids of '64 and who suffered or were part of the subsequent battles out here are recognized. Thanks, Joanna. Whoa. So the activity is listen and very quickly try to translate those beeps into the message. And if that's how fast the telegraph really came through, and probably, I mean, I've seen movies, sometimes it comes through faster. It's like beep, 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 beep. But even at that speed, I don't know what the message was. I'm gonna have to look at the answer, but I'm not gonna tell you because you need to come here and try for yourself. No way. There's no way I would have gotten that. How tall were those telegraph lines? Well, let's find out. Oh, we're still going. There we go. This is one of those things where I end up having like a bone to pick, but I don't need to, because the curatorial staff here at the museum has done a great job at making sure that misrepresentations are addressed. For example, this painting of Caspar Collins, Lieutenant Colonel William O'Collin's son, stationed here and the namesake of this museum. This image of him has no provenance that it's him. And even the sculpture of him, no provenance that it's him. This image and this sculpture are based off of a guess of if it was him from an earlier image. And now, as we get more responsible as museum curators and storytellers, we start to realize we can't just go off this guess. We need some more provenance. And so as far as the museum knows, they have this one image of him as a little tiny boy. My guess is 5 or 6 years old. And then they can do like an age progression of what he might have looked like. But I love this. They don't try to hold on to the legend. They say, hey, you know what? This has been claimed, but we can't stand on that. We can't keep, going on with guessing. We're gonna say we don't know, and that's cool. I respect them for saying I don't know. So in this box right now, there's this flyer for a reenactment of the battle at Platte Bridge, which was July of 1865, and that is when Caspar Collins was unalived. I think, is that the word I'm supposed to use now? Unalived. I feel so uneducated when I say that word. Anyways, so I know that we do like Civil War reenactments, and guys have a lot of fun, no matter what side of the war they're on, if they're portraying the Union or the Confederates, and when they get shot, they take it, it's a whole thing. But this to me, this makes me uncomfortable. Like, who plays the Indians? And I think, what Indians like, I'll volunteer to be, like, what? Something that a lot of folks don't or might not realize is that the museum is really central Wyoming history. It's not just military history. There's a lot more to it. So we can travel through time and see what life was like. And as the cities are developing, the industries, this is really our community museum, I've been to many museums in the last week, and it seems like every single one has these sheep wagons. I haven't done any research really into the sheep ranching business out in Wyoming, but apparently it's a big deal, enough to be featured in many, many museums. So right now they have an exhibit on railroads in Wyoming, and they're including the engineers in part of their exhibition. And I like that they set it up so it's almost like you see the person, you can actually see a picture of a conductor wearing the outfit, but you see them standing here as well. And you can imagine what they were doing back then, and all their little hats and trinkets and tools and stuff. And this one really connected to me because my father-in-law worked on a railroad, and his father before him, and as engineers. And I've heard many stories of the shenanigans that they would do while on the railroads, while they were out and about, and how at the beginning of their shifts, all the team that was going to be working with that train, they would all stand together and get their stopwatches, their breast pin watches, and they would get them all out and look at them and change them and set them just so that way everyone's watch was synced for the day. So little stories like that kind of bring this stuff to life. This is a traveling exhibition that they have about the railroads coming through. I remember we made sure that my father-in-law was able to see the Union Pacific's big boy when it came through Arizona. And that was really fun for him, really exciting for him, being a railroad man himself. It's one of those bucket list items, you know. Well, I hope you've enjoyed seeing and exploring Fort Caspar Museum with me today. I have to tell you, there is so much to see and do here. So many things to poke your nose into. You're gonna love it. Pack a snack, bring a water bottle. Maybe if the sun is out, bring your umbrella and your sunblock, because you're gonna want to really soak up everything you can see here at the fort. I'm glad to recommend it to you. Definitely put it on your list of places to go and things to see when you are in central Wyoming.